This is PJD 5, Laser 101 St. Martin, transmitting on 101.1 megahertz from Phillipsburg, St. Martin.
Laser 101.
First Saturdays, June 9th, with King James. Emilio's Rockland Estate. Proper attire, a must.
Want more data, you want more speed. Well, it's time to upgrade ya to 4G LTE. Yeah. You want more speed, 4G LTE. You know where to run to when you want more, want more, want more.
St. Martin, are we ready? Hi, this is Glenn.
And this is Jen.
And we'd like you to join us on Thursday, May the 31st.
From 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. for a special Stormwatch Team 2-hour segment.
Where we'll discuss St. Martin's hurricane preparedness.
We'll have in the studio with us our distinguished guests, the Honorable Prime Minister Leona Romeo-Marlin, Clive Richardson, and Joseph Isaac. So be sure to follow us on Facebook, Laser 101 Stormwatch Team, and send us all your questions and concerns ahead of time.
St. Martin, are we ready?
Guys, based on the 8 o'clock update of 140 miles an hour and still heading west, Mr. Joseph Isaac, the director of the MET office, called me. And needless to say, he says, Glenn, this is not turning out good at all. He is concerned that the forecast even has it to get to 150 mile an hour winds, which is approximately 5 miles shy of a Category 5. Heading west and not turning in the north 30 direction yet, this thing not only can come, well, it'll come most probably even closer to us than we first anticipated. He is talking about catastrophic consequences. Not only will a roof go, he says, but entire houses will go. We need to see what we can do tomorrow to check with our employees to see their safety. We're actually talking about convincing employees if their houses are not capable of handling this type of wind, they have to move. We're looking at managing loss of life and how we can prevent that from happening. Besides that, I have a feeling that our network is going to take one hell of a beating. So we have to look at our plans again. I know there's not much more we can do than this, but I just want everyone to realize that if a miracle does not happen, and it continues to develop as what he's saying it's going to do, we have a big situation.
Good evening, listeners. You're tuned to Laser 101, and you're with a special program of the Stormwatch team. Guess you're wondering what that recording was, but that was a voice note that was intended for the staff of UTS, and someone, I guess, sent it to someone else, and it leaked out and went viral in 20 minutes. And that recording was made 48 hours before the arrival of Hurricane Irma.
Good evening, everyone. This is Jennifer, and I would like to start off by introducing our distinguished guest this evening. We have in the studio with us, besides Glenn and G Money on the boards, the Honorable Prime Minister Leona Romeo-Marlin. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Clive Richardson, who's the Fire Chief and Disaster Coordinator. Good evening, Clive.
Good evening, Jennifer.
And Mr. Joseph Isaac, who is not with us this evening, but we have a pre-recorded segment, so we'll be getting to that just shortly.
Yes, Mr. Isaac is off island. However, we did an interview with him, and what we are focusing on with Mr. Isaac is the weather. What can we expect? What does the season of 2018 mean for St. Martin?
All right.
Mr. Isaac, welcome again in the studios of Laser 101. It was last year that you were here during a very, very intense hurricane season. And here in the next few hours, June 1st, and the beginning of hurricane season 2018, with the start of a new hurricane season, what can we expect?
Let me first say thanks to you, Glenn, and Laser 101 for having the MET services, as usual, to impart information to the public. It's always nice being in the studios of Laser 101. I hope this year I will not have to be here as often as last year, as we worked very well together, and we always emphasize that the meteorological service can have the information, but if we cannot get it to the public, then the information is not of any benefit to you, and the media being the conduit in which we use to get a message out to the public. A lot of times persons really look at forecasts and what the predictions are. Because of the type of year we had last year, everyone is trying to grab and write articles and everything else. There's so much going on. But again, as I always say, that half of our lives we live in the hurricane season, because the hurricane season is 6 months in every year. The most active part for us in our area would be really August, September. But anything can happen out of that period, out of the hurricane season and so on. We can have different storms pop up. In terms of what we're seeing in terms of the forecast, most of the reputable institutions that would do forecast predictions, they are just predicting slightly above average season. And I want to be clear on that because there's been a number of articles written and persons are saying that it's going to be as worse as last year. There is absolutely no credible forecast institution that I have looked at that have said that it is going to be the same as last year. All the predictions from the credible sources indicate that it is going to be above average but not as active as last year. I want to expound on that further and say that based on a lot of things that are used to predict the hurricane season, it is even possible that in terms of the predictions that we could maybe go to an average season or below average season, give and take. So that is what we're looking at presently. But then we still have to think that it only takes one. Yeah. So it doesn't mean that because we're above average or below average, it doesn't mean that it is a free card for us. So we have to go through the necessary preparations and do what we have to do. We like we said, it's half of our life we have to live in the hurricane season. So we should know the drills, and where we fell short of the year before, we should really be shining up those areas to know that we can be as ready as much as possible.
Before we go in more into the 2018 season, let's replay the 2017 hurricane season. Last year, what was it forecast to have been? Below average, average, above average? What was it supposed to have been last year?
Last year, around that time and a little earlier in the year, it was basically forecasted to be above average.
Above average?
About average. Just about average. And we all know what happened.
Yes. So what transpired? What caused that just above average to become a wow of a season?
Okay, well, basically a lot of the models we use in weather now, we use a lot of scientific models. Scientific models are based on a lot of different things. Some are very, very scientific. Some of them are based on a lot of statistics and so on. So we use a lot of models, and a lot of the models last year around this time were showing that we would be going into La Nina. Mm-hmm. And when we say La Nina, generally when we say a La Nina means it's a flip.
Yeah.
When we say El Nino, we're going into an El Nino. So an El Nino would mean more storms for us, and that did not happen. So we were actually in a La Nina, which means more storms for us in the Caribbean. So that is what happened. Yes, you may say, yes, that's what happened last year. This year is similar, but I think there's a little more evidence to show that we may be going into an ENSO or an El Nino year. And in terms of when we look at, for example, the sea surface temperatures and so on, we have had a very strong, over the past couple of months, we have had a very strong high pressure ridge And we also had a very strong cold core center in the north, and that has caused a very strong gradient. And as a result of that gradient, we have had a lot of strong easterly winds over the Atlantic, and that is one of the parameters that would assist in cooling the waters in the region.
Which we didn't have last year.
Which we didn't have last year. So generally around now, the waters in the Atlantic are looking cooler, a bit cooler than the same period last year. And when you run the models and you look at what the models are saying, as I said before, there are a number of things you look at. So, for example, when the scientists doing their predictions and so on, they would look at similar conditions over the years. So, for example, if we had the conditions we're experiencing now, they would go back and look and see similar conditions over, let us say, a 70-year or whatever period, and see how many years we had that and what were the end results. And as a result of that, that can assist them to give us the general forecast of what we expect.
This big climate change phenomenon. Some people are saying there's no climate change. Even the President of the United States is saying no, it has nothing to do with global warming. Is there something with global warming, climate change? Is the environment changing around us? Like, for instance, when we look at the Irma last year, I mean, how it intensified so short into this monster storm, which technically speaking, it was not forecast to become. Could the data that the scientists now are using no longer be functioning because of this perhaps global warming?
Well, you're free to call it what you want, global warming, climate change, and so on, but there are reasons to be concerned. Mm-hmm. There are a number of debates. There are debates that would say that why we're getting so much loss because of storms is that a lot of places the storms would have gone in 18 whatever or 1920 and so on. Those areas were not as built up as they are presently. And if you had to do a correlation and exchange the data and so on, maybe you're getting basically the same losses. That is a debate, but the important thing is that we have to live with it.
Yeah.
So what do we do to mitigate against those events is what is really important. One of the things we can say is that we are recognizing that in those tropical storms, you're having heavier rainfalls. And rainfalls are associated with flash floods and flooding. And in fact, in hurricanes, more people lose their lives due to storm surge and flooding than the actual wind. Yeah. So that is one of the things that we are studying very closely. So whether it's global warming or not, the important thing is that we have to deal with the events. And a lot of the reports indicate that going forward we expect to see strong storms and with a lot of rainfall, and that is of much concern. And as you rightly said, Irma was a monster, but when we even would look at a storm like Maria, yeah. Maria intensification was rapid within a 24-hour period. Irma was developed a lot slower than Maria, and to get that sort of thing in one season, and we can even zero it in. These two storms, and add Jose to it, was within a 2-week period. So it was a real intense type period for us. And generally, you'd feel if one storm comes across the Atlantic, it absorbs some of the warmth from the ocean and so on. So the other ones doesn't get that sort of energy to keep going. But that was a different ballgame altogether. We expect also that the waves coming across from Africa to move a lot quicker. And with the tropical waves coming and moving quicker, that would also assist in the possibility of having less storms.
Okay, but you did say, though, or at least that's what they also said at the conference that you were, that the possibility of storms intensifying faster and becoming more powerful seemingly now exists more. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. And there's a lot of that, and some of it has to do with the increased moisture in the atmosphere, especially over the Atlantic and a lot of times closer to the island chain. So because you have more of that moisture in the atmosphere, then you will get more rain from those systems.
People are saying, we had Lewis, now I think it'll be 23 years ago, so we don't have to worry that we'll get something pig like this again for another 20 years? Is there some scientifically, or is it just wishful thinking?
It's wishful thinking, and if you want to look at hardcore statistics and probabilities to put yourself at ease, maybe you could go that way. But if you know how probabilities really work, it doesn't always go that way. Once there's a chance of something happening, it can happen. If we look at the case of Grenada, it was 50 years that Grenada did not get a hurricane, and in 2 years they got 2 hurricanes. So if you had to look at the probabilities, for example, in Grenada, and you say, okay, 50 years we did not get a hurricane, and we got a hurricane this year, then the probability of getting one the following year would be so low that you would close your eyes. But they actually got a hurricane the following year. So in terms of probabilities, anything that can happen, it's possible to happen. I mean, the message is it's always good to follow the science, see what is happening and so on. But the underground message always is it's you as an individual knowing what you have to do to protect yourself and your family and your investments. I'll give you an example. If a storm is 5 days out, we know the probabilities you may be 70 miles north or south of the storm in terms of the accuracy of the forecast. Now, if a storm is 5 days out away from St. Maarten, there's a possibility that it could go 70 miles either side. If it goes 40 miles either side, then you basically escape from the system.
Correct.
But what do you do if a storm is 5 days out and is projected to hit St. Maarten? This would be a time for you to say, okay, do I have my shutters? Do I have X, Y, and Z? And then you continue to monitor. And then you take it in spells from there on. So it's really important as to how we really prepare for the systems. Like I said, we're in the hurricane belt. We expect those things, and we have to prepare for them. But sometimes we concentrate a little too much on storms and hurricanes. Sometimes you could get a very active tropical wave coming through with a lot of moisture, maybe interacting with upper level low or anything like that, and could give you 4 inches of rainfall. 4 inches of rainfall within an hour, 2 hours could have caused significant flooding on the island and so on. So the message really is this is a period where we have to keep our eyes open, know what is happening, know the sources for information, and being able to follow the sources of information and knowing what to do. Because some surveys have shown that people really get information, but they're not sure what to do. So it's one thing to say that a storm is going to hit St. Maarten, but it's another thing to give persons an indication of what kind of impact you expect. And sometimes you yourself, as a resident of St. Maarten, for example, would have to internalize the information and be able to know that if, for example, a storm is coming with 45 miles per hour or whatever wind speed, what it means to you. If you know you're going to get, is estimated to get 5 inches of rainfall in 3 hours, what's my environment? Is my environment such that I wouldn't be able to get out if it is flooding? Do I need to move before and so on? So you may really not be dealing with a hurricane, but there are certain actions you may have to take which may be the same as if you were dealing with a hurricane.
We'll take a small break now, and we'll be back in just a while.
Remember your UTS communication checklist this hurricane season. Load enough prepaid credit to stay in touch with loved ones. Charge phone and other devices before a storm, and have a portable charger for outages. Take down your outdoor internet antenna to avoid damage or loss from high winds and debris. Store vital documents and communication equipment in a dry, secure place. Create a family emergency plan with meeting points and other provisions in case you get separated. Stay safe and stay in touch this hurricane season. For more preparedness tips, visit UTS EC on Facebook.
Now Now you can take Laser 101 with you wherever you go. To the beach, driving in your car, on the bus, jogging. Maybe not jogging, boating, or traveling around the world, even in the shower. La 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 la.
Laser 101 now has a free player app for all smartphones and tablet devices. iPhone, iPad, iPod, BlackBerry, Android, Google, and Windows phones. To get your free Laser 101 mobile player, just log on to your phone's market or app store, then search Laser 101 and download the free player app.
It's a free country, don't you know that?
The Laser 101 player gives you Facebook and Twitter's social feeds and YouTube. And the best part, it's absolutely free.
So log on to your smartphone's app store now. Then search Laser 101. It's that easy. Oh, by the way, did we mention it's free?
I didn't know it was that free.
Radio on the go. Now you can take Laser 101 with you everywhere.
This hurricane season, Laser 101 is your Stormwatch team. Stormwatch team, bringing you the most accurate, up-to-the-minute weather information. We're Laser 101.
Yes, and we are back. Prime Minister, we got a little technical stuff going on here. Prime Minister, welcome to Laser. Mr. Richardson, welcome. We just heard Mr. Isaac giving a synopsis of 2018 hurricane season. Last year, we had a monster storm. Last year, we had a whole lot of challenges. We had looting after a monster storm. We had some challenges in the EOC. We had challenges managing the aftermath. And you are now the Prime Minister. In a while, we'll have the structure explained so that the listeners understand how the EOC functions. Good luck. You have one hell of a job because the name of the program is St. Maarten, Are We Ready? Ready could be, do you have a roof on your house? Do you have a house? Do you have hurricane shelters? But are we mentally ready? Are you ready?
Thank you, Glenn, for having me on your program this evening. I think it's a privilege to be here, and quite an interesting topic considering the time period that we're in. Tomorrow is June 1st, the start of the hurricane season. Are we ready? Well, we're going to be ready as much as we can be ready, because the fact is and truth is, this Hurricane Irma, at the end of the day, you could have never prepared totally be ready for such an hurricane. It's just Mother Nature. But what we can do is prepare for certain things so that we can mitigate damages, we can be able to recover better and faster. I think those are the things that are key when we're talking about getting ready, preparing, having plans in place. And at times, yes, plans will fall apart. But then again, we must think on our feet and be able to bounce back within a short period to answer certain questions or take certain actions, because not everything you can. You attended a disaster management conference that we recently had, and when you listen to the different groups speak, the different stakeholders, and at least when I was listening to them, you realize that sometimes some had a plan A and a plan B, but plan A went bad, plan B went bad, and the plan C went bad. Then what? Were they prepared? Yes, they were prepared for a plan A and a plan B, but the plan C it fell through as well, without pointing out which one. But nevertheless, I think that that conference identified the gaps, the areas that we can improve better, we can improve on so that we can be better prepared. We can always ask the question, are we ready? But the question is, it's an individual responsibility because if I'm a citizen and I don't prepare at my home, and then I get caught off guard, then eventually that puts a burden on government. Correct. Which is the truth. Now, then the question is, I as an individual, I have to ask myself and do the man in the mirror approach and ask myself, did I prepare? Did I make a plan for my family? Did I make a plan for evacuation just in case? So it's being ready. It's a collective effort, but you can never be totally ready. So it's a key question, but it's almost like a chicken and the egg question. There is no totally right answer for it, but we can prepare and we can plan.
Prime Minister, in a while we'll ask Mr. Richardson to explain the structure, because people are looking at, especially the both of you, when you mention just a hurricane, people say, I'm going to the airport, I'm leaving the island. People are not mentally prepared. They're looking at the both of you to feel that sense of, if something hits us, they're going to have it under control. Can you explain maybe how the EOC structure, what the EOC stands for, so that our listeners can understand from a managerial point of view how government will try to have a grip on the management of the disaster management? Can I, Mr. Richardson, could I ask you this? I know for radio it might be a little difficult because it's a visual picture, but try to explain how an EOC, what EOC stands for, how it works.
Good evening again, Glenn, and good evening to the radio listeners. The EOC is a structure that has the Prime Minister as the chair lady at the top. At that time, according to the disaster management plan, the Prime Minister is the upper bevel. That's the
Supreme Command. The
Supreme Command makes all the final decisions. Under the Prime Minister, you have the National Disaster Coordinator, which is the Fire Chief. And with the Fire Chief, you have the ESF, the Emergency Support Functions, which is 10 organizations out of government itself, which you have GB, you have BTP, Bureau of Telecommunications and Posts, you have VROMI, Infrastructure, you have the Fire Department, you have the Police, you have Health, you have Social Welfare, which is ESF 7, ESF 8 is DECOM, ESF 9 is Government Services, and ESF 10 is TEAT, Tourism, Economy. And they are the advisors to the chairperson, the Supreme Command. Under them, the EOC structure is structured in three different divisions. You have the operational part, you go up to the tactical, and you go up to the strategic. Under the tactical, you have the operational part, which is the COPI, and they are the coordination of the place of the incident. So they feed information to the EOC based on what is happening outside. They are your eyes, your ears, and they are your operations. And based on what's happening, they feed information to the EOC saying, okay, this is the situation, this is what we need to be able to lessen the burden or whatever it is that's necessary. And based on which member of the coordination team requests their assistance, or that goes to their ESF coordinator, and they make a decision, they make an advice, and they pass it on to the Prime Minister, and then the Prime Minister decides, okay, it can be like the hospital doesn't have enough beds, we need to contact the French side to see if they can assist us. Then the Prime Minister will give the okay, contact the French side and see if they can assist us.
Okay, now if I understand this correctly, and this is how, let's say, the structure that you have on paper, and we'll get in a while how it functions, how it doesn't function. How does the political scenario fit in this? What happens to the rest of the ministers? Because if I understand you correctly, the Prime Minister takes over. You count the shots. You are the big boss on top with that structure below. What happens to the other ministers during a time of when the EOC is activated?
At that time, the other ministers don't really have a role. According to what the Prime Minister requests, if she activates the National Disaster Plan, the Minister of Justice can be get some authority for justice matters, be it curfews, or he gets more authority, and the Justice Minister then comes into the picture. But basically, the rest of the ministers at that time have no function at that moment.
So from the time the EOC is activated, the Prime Minister is the one who basically takes the top control of... Okay.
Yes.
Question is, we'll get back into the storm, but things that went wrong right after the storm. The looting. Why didn't we stop it? how are we going to make sure it doesn't happen again?
Well, the looting, it was a very sad and moment for St. Maarten. I believe that that's the worst that has ever happened here on the island. And in my opinion, I wasn't here for 1995, but I know in 1995 there was looting because I was away and I watched it on television.
And the Marine shot someone right away in the leg.
Yes. Indeed, and that has been, we spoke about that as well. It only takes one example for everyone to know that it's business, strictly business. Now, okay, things didn't go as planned. Me, Glenn, I don't like to really talk about what went wrong in the sense of I was part of helping and getting things better, making sure that our community gets provided. When it comes to the looting, I believe that perhaps there could have been miscommunication, but what counts now is that ESF 5, which is the police department, they will have a key role in ensuring the safety of key areas. What we have started to discuss is the protection of key areas, for example, our food supply, to ensure that those are protected. We recently started speaking about the protection of our wells. That is an extra water supply. So this is one of the reasons why I talked about identifying the areas that we missed or either went direly wrong and then see how are we going to close those gaps. Businesses, of course, they were very in the planning and in various meetings that I had, a lot of businesses requested hurricane passes. But if there is a curfew, you cannot give every business a hurricane pass because there's too much traffic. But they wanted hurricane passes to go and check on their businesses because they were told that the businesses can be are being looted. But the problem is that they couldn't do anything anyhow. And police and the military was trying to make sure that there wasn't enough there aren't any movement on the road during a specific period. So what is key now is we have spoken about, and I believe that within short, we will have a next meeting again to identify those specific areas. What are your plans? Because we identified the gaps. Now we know what are your plans. Because this happened, how are we going to prevent it from happening again? We aren't going to give all businesses passes. We're going to give a few. And so we have organized it different, where we're going to also make sure that protection is in Phillipsburg, protection is in key areas to make sure, because at the end of the day, if we leave it alone and they loot our food, well, what are we going to eat within a week time? And that was we saw that going wrong, that there was no protection for the main wholesale food distributors. And therefore, at the end of the day, well, how are you going to feed your people after? Then we become dependent on outside help, where as government, you can't even feed your own people because those specific areas weren't protected. So we've learned, and these are lessons learned. The looting is quite sad. And we have spoken about, hey, perhaps we have to look at it, shoot. Yeah. Then, because the police lives were at risk during those periods.
That's my question. Will you be stricter? Will you?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. And that message will go out as well.
Okay, because your theme of your conference last week was taking charge.
Taking charge.
And we spoke about lessons learned.
Yes.
I applaud you very much that you said, listen, we are not going to bash the past because a lot of things did happen proper. But
yes.
it is a public secret that the community was wondering, why did the tanks of GB implode? What went wrong? Why was there looting? Why was there lack of communication? So you compiled all of that, and you said with your team, you're taking charge. Explain the community, because they heard about the conference. It was closed doors among us. Give a little explanation how you're getting a grip on the structure that Mr. Richardson just spoke about, your team, to make sure that the people that are listening to this program tonight, both on island and abroad, feel that level of comfort that this Prime Minister or this group is going to make sure that the lessons learned, we're going to be prepared as best as we can, and it won't happen again.
Well, one of the key things when we talked about looking in having this conference was the main goal was to, number one, look at the gaps, the areas that we missed, and say, okay, we're going to work on those specific areas. We're going to come up with a plan, because I'm looking at my one of my cabinet policy advisors who was also active in that period. One of the things we have identified is, okay, on the operational level, there's talk, there's discussions, etc. On the managerial level, there's lots of talks, there's dialogue. But when it comes to implementation, then you find some gaps. Now, the conference focused on the gaps, and you look at, okay, what happened for the GB tanks to be emptied? We know it's a public, they have stated it as well, because of communication or whatever happens, but now they know what they are going to do should a storm come. They have a plan in place that they're going to say, okay, within this amount of period, they're going to do X, Y, and Z, but that wasn't done the last time. So, you learn from the mistakes of what happened before, and I keep emphasizing that because I think it's very difficult to not take a man in the mirror approach. Like sometimes I remember I had a conversation with Clive, and Clive said, even in the conference, he said to me, you're doing these things, but when you hear certain feedback, it's almost like you're not doing anything. And I said to him, that's why I'm saying let's do a man in the mirror approach, because you could feel that you could be thinking that you're doing everything right, but then are you reaching your right target? Are you meeting your goals? And sometimes it takes others to identify where did you go wrong. And I'm glad that you were at the conference, because we have identified that, and the public can be rest assured that whatever happened in the past, whatever mistakes or whatever things that didn't go wrong, we are working on them. It's a lot. And as Prime Minister, I know a lot will be on my shoulders as the supreme in command, but it's a challenge, and a challenge that we are all going to do together. It's a work from everyone. It includes also the public, because you can try to and I will use an example of GEB with the water tanks again. There was an email or something on Facebook, I believe it went viral, just like you talked about.
It was a voice note, actually.
A voice note that went viral, and everyone started to fill up their water, and the tanks went down, and of course, but there's a plan in place for that now. But if that didn't happen, how would they have learned now?
Correct.
So we learn from our mistakes, and it's just part of life, learning from your mistakes and making sure that once identified, we do something about it. And the conference is about doing something about the mistakes that were made and taking charge, and also taking ownership, because sometimes you make a mistake or something went wrong, and you don't want to take ownership for what went wrong, but either you pass the blame, or you neglect it, or you just don't do anything no, it's about taking ownership, taking charge, and moving forward and saying, hey, for the protection of our people, for the safety of our the whole community, we are going to do X, Y, and Z and ensure that it doesn't happen again. Now, Glenn, the whole thing is, even though we have identified these areas, even though we say, okay, we're going to move forward and make sure that they don't happen again, God forbid another form of storm comes. That's something, if I listen to Isaac, he talked about the water damage, if there's a flood. What I realize is a lot of our plans were based on Hurricane 1995, Lewis. Now we have to tweak our plans, the way we thought before, because that wasn't a hurricane of 1995. It was a hurricane of 2017. So now we have to scale up our level of security, our level of thinking, our level of planning. Everything that we didn't think would happen in a storm perhaps happened, or that didn't happen in 1995 happened in 2017. So now we have to make our plans and change it towards taking actions based on experiences of 2017 and not of 1995.
Okay. Jen, you have some Facebook questions?
I just have in efforts to kind of not jump from topic to topic, and I do want to keep the questions of our listeners in mind, because they have sent us in some questions, some of them even 2 weeks in advance, and we appreciate them I know they've been listening to us during the hurricane, and of course they're looking forward to this special. So if you don't mind, I go back to a couple of subjects that we just talked about, but then we can finally close off those topics. The first one being, of course, the looting. I've got lots of inquiries, of course, about the looting. And, of course, one of them was regarding the change in decision to do a different protocol when it comes to giving out hurricane passes. A lot of business owners were concerned because there were a lot of implications in terms of insurance, that insurance would not cover looting to a certain extent because it was seen as damage that could have been prevented if they had taken proper measures to secure their businesses. Now, a lot of business owners are a bit worried because they're saying, if I don't have a pass and I cannot go and protect my business and insurance is not going to cover my looting, then that puts me in a really, really risky situation. And there were some businesses this year that had to close as a result of having all their inventory looted. Were you guys able to have any conversations with key stakeholders like insurance companies, or has this topic been addressed? Or
the topic of how insurances are going to cover certain damages, for example, that are caused by looting?
Well, not necessarily that, because of course that depends on the insurance policy, but more that the worry of the business owners not being able to safeguard their businesses.
Well, I had an intense discussion with both Clive Richardson as responsible for the hurricane passes, and also with the chief of police, Mr. Carl John, pertaining the same matter. And and my stand as Prime Minister was basically we have to find a balance. But something that the chief stated, and it's true, well, Clive's concern was, PM, you can't give all the businesses a hurricane pass. And he's right, because a curfew is a curfew, because you want to protect the people. A curfew means you stay indoors until the police and the military do their jobs. Now, on the other hand, you can understand businesses saying, well, how are we going to protect? But in actuality, what can they do after a disaster? The reality of the situation, what exactly can they do? So what we've done this year, we said, okay, we're in collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce. We have identified, they have made it in I think, if I could say, in sectors. So let's say the Indian merchants would have a specific amount of passes, not everyone. We're going to try to see how we're going to perhaps color code it so that you can only be out at a specific time. So we are trying to put a proper balance in between, because I can understand businesses wanting to go and check on their place of operation, but at the same time, I can also understand the what is a curfew, and especially if we call a state of emergency, that means everybody indoors. But we have found a way to accommodate the both, because we have that discussion, and the Chamber of Commerce has assisted us, and some will get hurricane passes, but not every business, because I believe the number was about 3,000 registered businesses on the island. We can't give 3,000 hurricane passes out, and that's per business. And imagine the business probably have 3, 4, 5 persons that they probably want. It's unrealistic. So we tried to take a realistic approach this year and said, okay, we will give some hurricane passes, but we're still looking at how we're going to coordinate that in the sense of making it color coded. So I'm still working that out with Clive Richardson and his team to see how we can still facilitate businesses in specific areas. But indeed, they will not get all 3,000 businesses will not get passes.
Yeah, I can imagine that just creates more congestion.
It does. It does.
All right, when it comes to still the topic of looting, because like I said, this was a very, very popular topic to ask questions about. There was a concern about the perception of looting being something that's kind of cool. It has turned into being cool, especially during the carnival time. There were songs written about looting, and if there's during the hurricane, we also had people calling in saying, but my neighbor's doing it, my friend's doing it, my sister's doing it, so I got to do it too. Is anything being done maybe to combat that stigma of looting being something that's in style?
Well, looting is definitely not something to be in style with, and I think that with the cooperation with the ESF5, which is the chief of police, we will start bringing out information so that the public knows what will be the end results in that direction. Again, it's about taking charge, and when it comes to that area specifically, we will take charge and do what is necessary to stop the looting.
Thank you.
Coming back, Mr. Richardson, to the EOC. Very impressive what I saw during the conference on paper, exercise, tabletops, but now when the manure hits the fan. You will have people that are key players in your structure, that will have their own personal damage. Lost their roof, family is out without a roof, some of them traumatized, some of them shell-shocked. What will happen to your structure if some of your key players collapse? How do you handle that? Because, if I'm not mistaken, we've seen some of that also.
Well, Glenn, to be honest, on the EOC, we have a list of all the EOC members, and every EOC member has a backup. So if one can't make it, the other one in turn replaces that person. I think last year, I have to say that everyone showed up, no matter what damages they had. There was we made a time and a place to meet, and everyone showed up. But there is a list. I personally also have a replacement if something happens to me. At that time, I have someone else that will step in and take over, and that person have someone that will step in and take over the position that person would be holding. So there is a list for every different EOC member. Even there is a list that we have a replacement.
Prime Minister, you want to add something in there?
Yes, indeed. And Clive, you need to give credit where it's due. Something that I learned from the conference, and it comes from the fire department. The firemen that were out, they had one group out there helping, the other group was helping those who got damaged. So they helped them. They helped their fellow workers. And when I heard that, it really touched me, because I didn't know that particular part. Because I can recall that persons were in helping. Those are EOC members and some other government workers coming in to help, but then who was helping them? So what we're doing this time is that we have identified, because I always say we need to take care of our own, because government needs to function, but what happens to those civil servants that have to come in, and even EUC members who has suffered some sort of damage? Someone have to take care of them. Government. So this year we have, we're busy with the budget, and we talked about it. So it hasn't been approved yet. That budget hasn't approved, but the idea is to have an emergency fund. I have already identified the funds and how much it might take a cost to put this aside. But part of that is to take care of civil servants that have to come into work. But what we're asking for is, for example, as Clive identified, each EOC, so each ESF has a team to work with, but we're also making sure that they have to identify their teams so that we know we're only going to take care of those that let's say it's mandatory, or they have been identified to come in when there is some sort of disaster. So they must be on the job. But there must be also a guarantee that I will come in, but you will take care of me. And I got that idea actually from Clive Richardson and the way they operated at the fire department. And that's what we need to do, because we can't expect people to come out and assist government to assist the people, and then government in turn don't take care of them.
But using that same philosophy, wouldn't that be the same way you think the private sector should go? So if each business, besides taking care of their family, would take care of their employees, like a chain effect. So in other words, take an inventory of, and I know some businesses have started doing it already, an inventory of all their staff. How is your house condition right now? If they know your house condition is not proper, maybe those employees would be able to stay in the business.
You know, Glenn, you said something great there, because at the end of the day, like I said, we are all in this together. It's not only government's responsibility, it's everybody's responsibility. So that is something that the business community can adopt as well. And as a matter of fact, some of them have, because if I can remember, without calling out specific companies, they took care of their employees.
Yeah.
They took care of their employees, and I would urge the business community to continue to do such. So use that as a way to make sure that you want your workers to come in. Then indeed take care of your workers, because at the end of the day, government can't do everything.
Correct.
We can't do everything. That's unrealistic. But nevertheless, businesses have a responsibility to the community as well, and I would urge them to do such.
Prime Minister, just another question about what you were explaining about the teams, and that was actually a question I wanted to ask earlier. Now that I understand the EOC structure, and you have the ESF, and then they have their teams, and as you said, learning from your mistakes is obviously the best way. That's in every aspect, in businesses as well. You always have to learn from your mistakes to move forward. If we look a little bit, I know we're not going to talk about too much about what went wrong, but the food distribution, for instance, last year was a huge issue, and I think one of the we did hear who was the head of who was leading the food distribution at one point. As a matter of fact, her name became very popular in here, but it seemed as if she was lacking the manpower indeed to actually get the food distribution going. And if I understand correctly, that would then be the team of that particular ESF that would then handle the food distribution. What exactly went wrong there, in the sense of, was it communicating with those people and the team members, or was it that they indeed, like you said, had problems with their roof, for instance, they suffered a lot of damage from the hurricane, so they were unable to come. How can we learn from gathering that proper team to do something as important as food distribution for hopefully not this time around, but in the event of another hurricane?
I can hopefully. I'm looking at Clive, but I can answer it a little bit in the sense of I was part of the team helping with food distribution, and some of the challenges are multi-layered in one sense. Yes, you have some workers that didn't show up, but a lot of them did. But was it enough? No. And what we've learned, that food distribution does not fall actually under that ministry. So we have identified such, and now it's going to be to the correct ministry. Don't ask me which one it is yet, because I can't remember at this moment. In addition to that, you had persons or organizations bringing in food and the transportation of such and getting access to it. So it was a bit chaotic. So we have identified those areas that went wrong when it comes to food distribution, and that's one of the reasons we're going to incorporate community councils assistance, because they know the community better. So and we're going to include, for example, making sure that certain shelters are manned with the right emergency equipment, and also perhaps certain goods to be able to feed the persons that are going to be inside of those shelters. So we have taken a different approach based on those experiences from in the past. But indeed, not enough manpower, trying to reach to the community, and sometimes not everyone in the community are actually getting. One of the concerns that I had is, sometimes our people, our local people are, we have a lot of pride, and sometimes you ask yourself, did our local people get help? Because they won't stand up in a line. No. They won't come out and beg. And that was a concern I had, because I was wondering, did our people come out? Did they get? So you try your best within the community that to make sure, you give out to the ones that that would get. And it is something to really think about. Did our local people actually got the assistance that they need? And we're going to we're going to work on those areas. We're going to definitely work on those areas and involve the community councils. And I'll take this opportunity to ask the community councils, please get organize. Get your councils registered, because we will be using the community councils as focal points as well in order to assist in food distributions, because who know their community better than the community councils? They definitely know them better than government. So I saw the need for and we did it, but can it be better? Yes. Can it be better structured? Yes. So community councils will be one of the strong points in ensuring that the community get food, and also to ensure, for example, persons don't have to leave where they're at to go anywhere. They can do whatever they have to do within the community because of curfew as well.
Definitely.
Just for our listeners to know, we are not taking any calls because we see the phones flashing. I think they can contact us via Facebook.
Yes,
maybe,
they
Jennifer?
can send us any message on our Facebook, which is Laser 101, or our Stormwatch team page, or if you have me personally on social media, why not send me a message there?
Prime Minister, I'm going to get to you because I have some other questions there too. But Prime Minister, coming back again for self-supporting. What we notice here at Laser, calls coming in from people immediately after the storm. When I say immediately, 3 days after the storm, that they didn't have no baby food, They didn't have no water. They didn't have no food, no medication. They wanted to know which pharmacies were open immediately after the storm. The media, and I know the GIS does it too, constantly promoting be self-supporting. Government can't do everything. Government is there to make sure that the infrastructure is back, the roads are clean, there's water, there's communication, there's electricity, but the population itself, how long should it be self-supporting? A week, 2 weeks?
We're aiming for about 1 week. That's what we discussed in.
Is that enough?
Is it enough? It probably isn't, but at least 1 week give government enough time to mobilize and see what is going to come into the country, what do we have here already, and how we can better assist the public. But every individual should plan for at least 1 week to be self-supported.
Now, we're then asking people, they say, yeah, it's easy for them to say, but I don't have a roof on my head, I don't have a job, I have no money to buy a case of water. How do we handle those people?
I think that first of all, they're going to still need to have some type of plan, whether it's by family or friends. They need their own personal plan. I understand it's a dilemma. It's a situation some persons are in right now, but that's why we're going to have a program coming within short. It's going to be, I believe UNDP started some houses, I believe last week. Government is going to start a few. Once the World Bank money kicks in within short, we're going to continue that roof to repair program. But at the end of the day, everybody needs to make a plan. And everyone's situation is quite different. Sometimes people, human nature, wait last minute. I can tell you, I can confess and say, Glenn, I forgot to take money out of the ATM machine. I just forgot. And that can happen, but am I preparing from now? Yes, I'm definitely preparing from now based on what happened the last time. So the only thing next is to do an evacuation plan to see what exactly, well, now it's a little different for me because as Prime Minister I would have a different role, but definitely for my family and I will extend it to my extended family as well, emphasize the need for evacuation. How are we going to get in contact with each other after the storm passed, etc.? Because, I have family on the front side as well. So it's always, how are we going to communicate? So we have to, it starts now. Don't wait last minute. Start now.
Talking about making the plan, Mr. Richardson, the airport. We have a couple tents down there that are humongous. It takes days to take them apart.
10 days.
Days to put them back. Who makes the call when to start dismantling that tent and then for nothing because it went north? And that's a difficult situation. Is that something the EOC is involved in, or is that something management of the airport has to decide?
Basically, that's something that management of the airport has to decide. Airport has a disaster plan, which is required.
Have you seen that disaster plan?
Yes, they have. We have the disaster plan. They update it every amount of years. They update it.
But has that disaster plan been updated with the new environment of that tent?
No, but I can say they had an evacuation drill and everything this week where we were invited to evaluate it.
Mm-hmm.
So they are busy putting things in place so in case of any disaster or any incidents. They are busy with that.
Now, what's your opinion on houses having a safe room? Some people are able to put a concrete roof back, so in other words, making the house secure. Some people cannot. Your opinion of maybe taking a smaller room and turning it into a safe room, is that something you would promote?
I would definitely promote that because if your roof goes, instead of having to run outside with wind speeds of 100, 200 kilometers an hour, which is a very dangerous scenario because you don't know what's flying around out there. If you have a room, even if it's a bathroom, a room with like one door, one window, and you have a concrete roof on it, you can bunker there.
We'll go for one more question here, and then we are reaching halftime, and then we will go to a commercial break.
Do you need a break already?
No,
do we need to do another?
Jennifer,
how long you can go?
I can put you under the table
Are you
any
sure?
day.
Because I remember clearly I won. Okay.
Okay.
On the topic of the safe room, and I'm sure there's an assessment made about how many houses right now that are not storm ready, that are probably awaiting the rebuild to put roofs on. We won't get into that because I'm sure that's a whole topic on its own. But for instance, those that need to evacuate to a shelter, I know tomorrow is June 1st and everybody's eagerly awaiting the official shelter list. Has assessments been completed? Do we have an official shelter list out as yet?
At the moment, if I remember correctly, there are like five that are already assessed, and they're busy with the rest. But we still would like to advise each and everybody, make an agreement with family, friends, neighbors, because there's no guarantee that the shelters would stand up.
So let's be clear about this. Let's be totally open and honest. Would it be better just for the people to know you cannot really count on the shelters at this time? Let's be Prime Minister, I'm going on thin ice here.
Well, and I'm glad you went on thin ice. As Clive said, every individual needs to still make their own evacuation plan, because the reality is, the shelters, we are assessing the shelters, we're going to repair the shelters. But remember, most of the shelters, maybe we shouldn't even call them shelters,
Correct.
are schools.
Yeah.
And the schools can get damaged. Now, what we're planning to do with some of the trust fund money and the European fund money that we'll be getting is to make multifunctional shelters, kind of like bunkers, safe places that can be used as a shelter.
But that will be ready for September.
That would not be ready for September because we're getting the European funding. That's about 7 million euros, and they're going to start. That's for 2019.
Okay.
The process takes very long. Now, the trust fund, I believe we can. I don't know. I asked that question. Maybe 1 or 2, hopefully, but it's going to be done maybe by October. 1 or 2. But what we are relying on right now is what the existing shelters that we have right now, and they're mostly schools
that have been damaged.
That have been damaged and are going to be repaired. But again, you can't be dependent on the shelters that we have right now.
So it's best that the media, government promote that everyone knows from today, from tomorrow, June 1st, I got to start looking for alternatives if my house has been compromised.
Correct.
Friends, families, enemies, by your business owner, look for alternatives, because shelters is not something that we can depend on
but
at the moment.
If my memory serves me right, last year there was about 11 to 12 shelters. You said just now, Mr. Richardson, that there's 5. Are those 5?
No. There are 5 that have been assessed.
5 that have been assessed.
Correct. And the
have
others,
those been officially marked as shelters? Will they be publicized?
Yes,
as shelters?
we have a list that we're working with.
Okay.
And that list we're going shelter by shelter to check what damages do they have, what exactly needs to get fixed, and those are the shelters that are going to be published to say, okay, these are the areas that we have identified, we have fixed them, and we're also looking for other possible areas for people to run to or to be rescued and stay there, and we want to make sure that they are equipped for persons to be able to
But a shelter should basically be safer than my house. So in other words,
it depends on where.
If we have a school that has been compromised also, you don't want to take 5 people out of the house and put in with another 100 people in an area that could be
which is true.
Exactly.
Which is true.
So I think in all fairness to the community, and that's of course your call, instead of people putting in the back of their head, no problem, I'll go to a shelter that they know from before, look for an alternative.
Yes.
And that so-called shelter could be something maybe after the storm in case they need a central place for getting food or water.
Yes.
So there's a couple of things we have to promote, because I'm learning from this as we go along, is that trying to promote the population to be self-supporting for 2 weeks. Make sure you have your medication, baby food, that you don't have to count on government for 2 weeks, so taking that strain away from government. And shelters is not really something that we are going to really promote. Look for an alternative, family, friends, by your business, by your job. Start talking to your employer. Can 10 of us fit in your store? And then maybe at the same time keep the looters out.
I can say that is one of the requests from. I can say that's one of the requests from the Prime Minister. That the public service announcement be made, informing the public that leave the shelter be your last resort. You know, go.
I'm glad we
family, friends, or neighbors. Make some kind of a plan, agreement with them. You know, and see what can be arranged there. And if it's not possible, then you look towards the shelter. But first.
Okay, G, I think we'll go to a small commercial break, and we will be back for another 50 minutes of more information here on Laser 101 Stormwatch team, St. Maarten. Are we ready?
This is PJD 5, Laser 101 St. Maarten, transmitting on 101.1 megahertz from Phillipsburg, St. Maarten.
Laser 101.
St. Maarten, are we ready? Hi, this is Glenn.
And this is Jen.
And we'd like you to join us on Thursday, May the 31st.
From 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. for a special Stormwatch Team 2-hour segment.
Where we'll discuss St. Martin's hurricane preparedness.
We'll have in the studio with us our distinguished guests, the Honorable Prime Minister Leona Romeo-Marlin, Clive Richardson, and Joseph Isaac. So be sure to follow us on Facebook, Laser 101 Stormwatch Team, and send us all your questions and concerns ahead of time.
St. Maarten, are we ready?
Remember your UTS communication checklist this hurricane season. Load enough prepaid credit to stay in touch with loved ones. Charge phone and other devices before a storm and have a portable charger for outages. Take down your outdoor internet antenna to avoid damage or loss from high winds and debris. Store vital documents and communication equipment in a dry, secure place. Create a family emergency plan with meeting points and other provisions in case you get separated. Stay safe and stay in touch this hurricane season. For more preparedness tips, visit UTS EC on Facebook.
This hurricane season, Laser 101 is your Stormwatch team. Stormwatch team, bringing you the most accurate, up-to-the-minute weather information. We're Laser 101.
Good evening, St. Maarten, and we're back. For those of you that are tuning in right now, this is a special segment from the Stormwatch team here on Laser 101 with the theme of Are We Ready? And in the studio tonight, we have the Honorable Prime Minister Leona Romeo-Marlin, as well as Mr. Clive Richardson, the Fire Chief and Disaster Coordinator, Glenn, and of course G Money, who's been awfully quiet the entire evening, but he says he's okay.
He's still gagged from last year.
That's another topic to talk about. No, we won't go there. All right, my next question. This topic, there was a lot of controversy around these three little words, state of emergency. There was a lot of discussion. It took too long to declare a state of emergency. As a matter of fact, it was words that was being thrown around by any and anybody, and I think nobody really fully understood what does a state of emergency mean. So if maybe you could start by explaining a little bit to the public what a state of emergency is, what are the consequences of a state of emergency, and what your personal opinions are now as, new faces in the studio of, what actions we should take in the event of another storm if something similar, like compared to the looting that happened last year, would take place.
Basically, during the conference, there was a lot of controversy about that also, because not everybody understood the meaning of the state of emergency. So therefore the Prime Minister requested to have it looked into, and requested a next EOC meeting so that everyone can be explained the different legal aspects of the whole EOC and the whole state of emergency. Basically the state of emergency gives different players different authorities, and that was something that was not understood at that time, because it's something that came up new since 2010. So before I go into that, I would still rather it be sorted out all the legal terms before I use a word that makes a whole complete different story.
Okay.
And when we have that, I will gladly come back and give a complete explanation with our legal department.
So I hear a follow-up program here already.
Well, we already saw that.
It's there's a lot of laws that has come into play since 2010, and I remember when my good friend behind me, Mr. Richardson, Rodney, wanted to start a radio station. I said to Rodney, I will sign over money to you if, even if it's once a week, you have a program based on the the laws of St. Martin, so that people get an understanding of the laws.
Okay.
And therefore, I still would like to have our
You
legal
still have money
department.
left you can make over to us on that.
Rodney, take it off.
If we can go into the exact meaning of what a state of emergency is, let's say right now, could you give us maybe an explanation as to what happened in the case of Irma when a state of emergency was called? What exactly happened in that situation?
Or what did not happen?
What happened, what did not happen, in your opinion? Can you, because a lot of people do not, like for instance, in the case of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, a state of emergency was called before the storm even made landfall. And because that happened a few days after, our situation here on St. Martin, there was a lot of controversy.
In fact,
it was called too late.
It happened last week with Alberto in the Gulf. Before Alberto even made landfall, 2 days out, a day out, because I guess of the experience, it was called a state of emergency. Yeah, I would like to know, does a state of emergency take the powers away from the Prime Minister, or does it give you more power? Are we putting you guys on the spot?
The state of emergency doesn't take the power away from the Prime Minister. However, when it comes to who controls, if we ask for military service or assistance, then who is in charge of the military? It is not the Prime Minister, but the governor. He is in total control of the military during a state of emergency. But again, we're going to do different scenarios as it relates to, okay, if we call a state of emergency, then what? And we learned from in the conference that it has to be specific, certain things. So it's a learning exercise.
Okay, so in all fairness to you, sort it out, find out exactly how it's structured.
And we will come to the public and let the public know, because they should also know when it comes to a state of emergency, what happens what are the consequences to them as it relates to the military.
But Prime Minister, let's get down to the looting again. It is a hot topic because I know we were bombarded with that. What I saw, because I was out there, not looting, but I was out there also, it was not normal.
Yes.
Is there a different undertow in our community? I mean, if people were stealing water and food, I could understand. But going with televisions and cars, I cannot understand. Is there something that was premeditated? What do you think?
I'm glad that you asked that question, because I'm still wondering what was going on in the people's mind. There's no electricity, but you're stealing electronic goods. And, I'm told actually after that people came in for just to loot. I don't have the facts on that, but it's talk. I also heard people were already, they were already looting. I'm also told that people hid during the storm outside, in businesses or certain areas because they already had planned to loot. But there needs to be a paradigm shift in the way we're thinking, because we cannot continue in this direction, because in the end, it's going to destroy St. Martin. And when you destroy St. Martin, it's more difficult for us to bounce back. Because if you take everything, then what? But I must commend the actions of the police after looking for looters.
Yeah.
Looking for those who confiscated items. I saw it on Facebook. I heard exactly what was happening.
Were those looters debriefed when they were arrested? Basically, were they asked, "Did you do this?"
That I can't answer. I can't answer that. I don't know. But it's, you ask yourself what was going on in person's mind.
And seeing that you are working very closely with GIS, is there any campaigns going to start to, let's say, work on this part instead of us talking about shooting them? Can we maybe defuse them before they even think of doing it?
We DECOM and the rest of the ESFs, we are working on a communication plan, and that is going to be an area that we're going to tackle as well, in the sense of when it comes to safety and security, and giving warnings, and giving, going out and trying to speak to people via the different forms of media, because, it's it saddens me because you ask yourself, and sometimes even as parents, what would leave a child or a young person, your child, to go out and execute those kind of bad behavior. I myself didn't understand it, but we are going to have a communication plan that will be out soon. We're already working on it, and each ESF have to give that information so that we can include it in the communication plan, because we need to inform our public. So, but they also need to know the consequences.
And what could they do
and
if
what,
they decided?
Correct. And we urge parents to speak to their children. But as I stated before, this time around with looting, there will be no questions asked. We will take charge.
Yeah.
Because you're putting the military at risk, you're putting the police at risk as well. So, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Richardson, we heard Mr. Joseph Isaac say earlier that very often in storms it's mostly the water that causes the most, wouldn't say the most damage, but that is the most life-threatening situation. I think the two persons that passed away immediately after hurricane or during a hurricane was water-related, drowned, etc. However, you also mentioned just now that you don't leave your house because of flying debris. Which we have seen a lot with roof tiles passing straight through car doors, etc. But if you drive around the island, you see a lot of old 20-foot, 40-foot containers along the road. You see the old government building with the galvanized still half loose. That could be flying debris. So, in other words, what I'm trying to say here is that even if we get a Category 2, but because St. Maarten, everything is loose, a lot of that belongs to property owners, private sector people. What are the plans to clean up the island to get rid of the loose debris? And don't tell me you're going to put it on the dump, but okay, we got to get rid of them. What's the plan?
Well, I know I heard on the radio of this last week that Romy, Mr. Boncampo, was telling everyone to gather their garbage, gather all loose items in the yard and put them outside. There's a whole schedule of where they will be picking up. I think Wednesday was St. Peter's area, but they're busy picking up the different areas. But I advise people to do it because most people wait until the day before the storm is coming or 2-3 days before, then they realize, yes, it's coming, and then they put the stuff outside. And seeing at the moment that we don't have all the garbage trucks that we had, let's say, a year or 2 years ago, it makes the job for the garbage collectors even more difficult to get all that stuff away in time.
But isn't there some mechanism we can put in place that you drive around, city inspector, put a big X or a number on a car that is along the road and say, if you don't move it, you're going to get a fine or something, because as you said, you tell them about it, but no one does anything about it. In fact, when you leave Laser 101 right now and this evening, you could see all the junk, all the broken cars, everything outside.
I think in particularly the cars, because what happens now, you have a lot of cars that are probably not mobile, and certain persons park it on the sidewalk, the unofficial sidewalk that it overlaps onto the road, and that creates evacuation threat, because now you no longer have the full 2 lanes. So that's maybe indeed another revenue stream that could generate for government. Impose a fine.
It's a plan of Romy to start doing that. They have different types of cleanup campaigns that will be going on. We have spoken about that, and it's part of Romy's plan as well.
Which then brings me to the next question. We know that you are a networker. Okay. We know that you are building bridges. French side, we've seen you in the Netherlands. Compliment, the Netherlands likes you a lot. Tonight I'm hearing that the Rampen Bureau of Curaçao is listening to us. We had a call from Aruba. How do you plan to work on building those relations that they can assist us and we can assist them, because something can happen vice versa on Curaçao or Aruba also? How do you plan to continue that?
Well, dialogue, that's key. I believe in the conference we brought the disaster coordinator from Curacao, and I've been speaking to the Prime Minister of Curacao as well, and he's always open to assisting St. Martin. And we are going to continue those talks with the former Antilles, and because we can always assist each other. Those dialogue has never stopped. Sometimes I ask Clive for different issues, and he would be like, yeah, we're going to get help from Bonaire, we're going to help the fire department. So that dialogue between the former Antilles is still there, and that assistance is still there. What we want to do now is have address certain situations and structure it in a specific manner. And this includes having dialogue with, for instance, Maarten. We have always asked the front side for assistance as it relates if there's a fire, and they are always willing to assist us. So we're going to continue those dialogues and make sure that we address certain other issues, because again, after a while, the state takes their status is in control. But we're going to look at the local government and see how we could be better cooperate with each other and assist each other during any kind of disaster. The same goes to Curacao and Aruba. They have identified some areas that have their concerns, and we are going to address them in a different format. And we're also going to take it on a kingdom level, where we're going to start speaking about how to handle disasters here in St. Martin based on past experiences or the last experience, what went wrong, what didn't go wrong, and how we can improve. Because at the end of the day, it is our opinion, or it's my opinion then, that Curacao and Aruba is right there. The Netherlands is over 8,000 kilometers away.
Correct.
So if they can assist us ASAP, we want the first assistance that can come to St. Martin as a rescue, not excluding the fact that should there something happen on the Dutch side of the island, what assistance can St. Martin assist us as well. So dialogue is important, and even within the region as well, the other Caribbean islands that understand disaster, not understand disaster, but understand hurricane being in the same beltway, how we can cooperate with each other in some form of level. It's and that's a different type of conversation, because now you're dealing with other partners, be it regional or international. So we have to take it up another notch and say, okay, it's time to have that dialogue, because we need to have that talk with the Netherlands as it relates to handling disasters in St. Martin. Who's going to be the first responders? How can, let's say, Curacao and Aruba assist us within a specific period of time? If they can't handle it, then what happens next? If we need to evacuate people, can we evacuate people to the Netherlands, or are we going to use Curacao and Aruba as evacuation points like we did the last time? But it needs to be structured. It needs to be regulated. We need to start having those types of talks very, very soon.
Do you think that this type of dialogue will then lead to protocols and SLAs with also NGOs?
Yes.
And will you have it done on time?
That is the direction that we're going into. And again, I have the full cooperation of the disaster coordinator and the Prime Minister of Curacao. We've had that dialogue. That is the direction that we will eventually go into. But of course, we have to find a platform for us to have open discussions on kingdom level as to how are we going to handle a disaster should it hit St. Martin. But also, I can also state, how should we help Saba and Statia if they got hit and St. Martin didn't?
Exactly.
How can we assist those two islands, because they are right next door, and we can easily have access to them than 8,000 kilometers away.
A touchy subject.
Yeah.
The money from the Netherlands. Everyone is waiting to see. While I'm driving around, I see a lot of people building back. A lot of, restaurants are opening up. A lot of businesses are opening up. Maho starting to fix up. Good, fantastic, great. But there's a whole lot of other stuff that we heard that funds would be made available. Bring us up to speed on what's happening with that.
Yes. We are right now in a stage of, so you know that we are getting 470 million euros from the Netherlands, and in the first tranche we're getting 112. In the first tranche, they're going to take care of specific things, and in this tranche, that's what we're in right now. The fire department will get taken care of because the emergency services. So you have fire department, you have the police, you have and the ambulance, because we have to make sure when there is an emergency, when there is a disaster, that they have the right equipment to be able to tend to to whatever event is happening. This is in addition to a alarm, the siren alarm system. And Clive has identified all the things that they have needed for disaster as being the disaster coordinator for some quite years. He made sure he put all those things inside of those things. So we're going to get that. Now,
so sorry to interrupt you. We're going to get that. When? How long? Months? Next year? Hurricane?
That is the magical question. However, some have doubt, but I'm very much convinced, and I keep the Netherlands to their word, and I believe they will keep their word. Afspraak is afspraak. This is the monies that have been allotted for St. Maarten, and we will get those monies.
But just like the shelters, Prime Minister, sorry to interrupt. Just like, the honesty does. The chief of police, chief of the fire department, and the chief of the ambulance department have to say, okay, we're getting it, but it won't be here for the peak, so we have to work with what we have.
Correct.
Is that basically what we're saying?
Well, that's basically what we're saying.
Okay.
That is, but we are ready. We have our plans ready. We have everything ready for when that money, the day the money touch on our bank accounts in St. Maarten, it's execution time. And that is what we have to prepare for.
Okay.
When you're speaking about, are we ready? Those are the things that we're preparing and getting ready for, because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that these things are in place within short, because it's vital and needed. Now, that those monies will also be allocated for debris removal from, we still have boats in the lagoon, and those need to be removed. We have, what else we have in that? I spoke about this thing so much times, it's like, we have the debris removal. We have a training in hospitality training for those in the hospitality sector, that they will be getting part of the trust fund as well. That is to ensure no massive job loss. So we couldn't deal with something like that. So we have implemented that system. And then you also have, so we talk about emergency services, we talk about debris, we talk about hospitality, and there's one more. But nevertheless, the funds will be here within short. I'm going on the 12th, well, not the 12th, but earlier, to Washington, D.C., where we're going to have our first steering committee meeting. However, that is for the second tranche of projects, but where the steering committee now will be have the ultimate say whether these projects other projects will be approved, yes or no.
But when the funds come in, the buzzword now is transparency, corporate governance. So you're going to have bidding processes. You're going to have to ask the quotations. So that will take a while.
Yes. Well, the second set of monies will come in October. It is allotted for October, and we are preparing the second set of projects for those funds.
Okay.
So we have to prepare. We have to be ready. And I'll take this opportunity to tell our ESF groups, organizations out there, those who would like funding through the trust fund, to make sure that if you are interested, you approach someone from the IRC group. If you have an idea, you have a project that will benefit, and you can see if it will be financed, yes or no. But there are specific rules that must be followed. The World Bank processes must be followed. It can't be that I'm giving a job to my friend because it's my friend. My friend has absolutely no experience in building roofs or building or fixing whatever. It is a process that is very transparent. And we have to be accountable for every cent that the Netherlands have given us.
Prime Minister, just so that we can break it down as simple as possible for all our listeners, you explained about the first tranche of money and that it has not, quote unquote, hit the bank accounts yet. Is the reason for that it has not reached us yet because we're still defining the projects and coming up with an execution plan? What is the reason that it has not, quote unquote, hit the bank accounts as yet?
Well, we haven't signed the grant agreements with the Netherlands pertaining to those specific projects. We are in the phase of going into that direction now. That should within 2 or 3 weeks.
So it's more like legal work right now.
Yes, because we know that the World Bank was the chosen entity to monitor the funds coming from the Netherlands, and they have their own processes, they have their own procedures that we have to comply with. And as I said before, we have our projects in line. We have identified the first set of emergency projects, so it's just about implementation right now. And the World Bank has assisted us in preparing for those projects, preparing for those implementations. So we are on track. We are on track. It's just about when the funds are going to be ready once the grant agreement are signed, and we're hoping that that gets finalized sooner than later, because I'm sure everyone sees that Hurricane Mother Nature doesn't wait for a date.
No.
We have Hurricane or Subtropical Storm Alberto already formed before the official June 1st date. So you can never tell when we're going to get a storm. So we're just hoping that that message has translated into the urgency of all realizing the urgency of ensuring that those funds are here within short.
Okay. My next question is coming back to the World Bank. I understand that there's certain protocol that's going to be followed, transparency, and like you said, making sure that people that are awarded certain jobs actually have the qualifications to do so. And I completely respect that. What if we cannot find certain people in certain fields? Does that mean that we'll be bringing in consultants from abroad?
Well, we're going to bring the, yes. And to say it like that, yes.
Okay, so if we're lacking a certain person in a certain industry, the World Bank will see to it to bring in foreign people within a certain industry in order to complete the project.
And in addition to that, we also have the possibility of asking for technical assistance. That is going to be, we already have done such through BZK. That list has been sent to BZK, and the various ministries have identified the key areas that they need assistance with. Then we also have a possibility, I believe it's 40 million has been allotted for other types of assistance as well. So we will be, I believe that's the same one, that we will be tapping into those, because of course we don't have all of the expertise here in St. Martin. And at the end of the day, Jennifer, at the end of the day, it's about getting the job done within a short period of time for the benefit of our people.
And who determines who has the expertise or not? Is that the World Bank, or is that the head of the steering committee?
Well, the expertise it's a combination. If you have to bring your CV, you have to prove that you're capable of doing what you are. So you leave your trademark. Your trademark stands in your CV. Yeah. There's an application. There's a process. You have to prove X, Y, and Z that is needed, meet those criterias, and then I believe that.
Okay, my final question on that topic: the jobs that will come out of this, where will they be made public? Where can people apply?
The jobs that will be coming out of the recovery, or you mean the jobs, because there are jobs right now for National Recovery Bureau.
That's different. That I understand you need certain qualifications. Yeah, but let's say it'll come down to like the nitty gritty, as in construction, or will these jobs be made somewhere public? Where can people interested go to see where they can apply?
I believe VROMI has sent out I believe VROMI is handling, because most of these projects are falling on the VROMI. I believe they have stated certain things already. I'm not 100% sure, but I know there was talk about what we emphasize, that if a company or anyone is coming to St. Martin to with their expertise or their own expertise, we would like them to hire and train locals as well. Train them the trade, so that our people can have the opportunity to learn as well, because of course, and we don't have all the expertise, or we don't have all the skills here. But we would like for our locals, those residents that are living here, to ensure that they too can be part of the rebuilding process. But when it comes to, I know one of the dilemmas have been finding adequate construction companies to assist in these projects, and I believe when we had a meeting the last time, they stated that they were having problems finding workmen. So it's a dilemma, and we're working through that, because there's no magical answer, because we have to look at, yes, we need the labor and we need it right now, but we can say, okay, let's import persons from abroad, but then what does that mean if we don't put certain things in place? Because today it's nice, but tomorrow is the problem.
Tomorrow they need to have working permits, residence permits. They have to have medical coverage.
Exactly, and then so exactly. So what we have to do is when we make decisions, we have to look at short-term, long-term, short-term, mid-term, and long-term consequences, and make sure that we cover those gaps. And those are the talks that we're having right now, and that's why you would hear our Minister of Health and Labor indicate that they're going to kind of slacken the regulations, because the fact of the matter is that we are going into the hurricane season, and we need to do these things for the people now. And after that period, then we can talk about other stuff.
Of course.
Mr. Richardson, I know that many NGOs mean good. They get help from abroad, they're sending in clothes, you name it. Red Cross, for instance, also taps into a decent amount of funds. How does the EOC control that there's no duplication of things done or areas that are not covered? So in other words, all these NGOs, how do you bring them in to the total coordination of assistance?
Well, basically, Glenn, that was a big issue after Irma last year, because the NGOs are international. Red Cross, an international organization, and basically we had a lot of organizations coming in, and where they would have to fall under, let's say, ESF 7 or ESF 6, we didn't really have any control of who was coming in, what they was doing. So it was a big fight, a big discussion during the EOC, and I can tell you the coordinator had a rough time doing that.
But how do we solve that this season around?
I have had some talks with some persons that are doing evaluations and about how it went. And like one of my ideas is to have a focal point that for the time they come in, this is where they go, and they're given a liaison, someone that belongs to the arm of the organization here in St. Maarten, like the Red Cross St. Maarten, and that person then can report to, let's say, ESF 7, but it's a challenge.
So yes,
but we also, to add to what Clive stated, we also looked at having a central registration system that international organizations will have to register from beforehand before they're coming to St. Maarten.
Okay.
And that registration, because imagine you're having a lot of organizations here, you don't know who they are. As Clive said, you don't know who they're going to report to. But at the end of the day, yes, humanitarian aid is welcome and is needed. But we are still in control, and it's St. Maarten needs to know who is here, what are you bringing into the country, etc., and that they will still fall under a specific focal point, as Clive indicated, because at the end of the day, you're still coming into this country. You're helping, which is much appreciated, but we need to have some type of control of who is coming here, what are they bringing, and the good thing is we're going to try to get them registered beforehand so that we know that this specific international organization is here and they're going to do X, Y, and Z. So one of the lessons learned is to make sure that we have a registration system.
We have, sorry Glenn, under ESF 9, which is governmental services, last year we created a coordination center, and that center was designed that all information goes into that center, and then it goes to the different organizations of person on ESF. So if the Prime Minister needs to know, all her information comes from that center, because you don't want someone calling the Prime Minister or someone calling the Minister of Tiyat, and they're getting the same information but in a different manner, because it causes a lot of confusion.
Yeah. So we still have kingdoms. You have little kingdoms and little silos that we need to get a grip on so everything can flow. I see a smile. I won't say who's smiling, but it was just
well, the thing is, it's me smiling. The thing is, though, Glenn, you know, kingdoms can be created when there is no structure.
Correct.
So, in essence, we're taking charge this time, and they will have to register.
Okay, which then brings me to my next question. Simpson Bay Lagoon. Simpson Bay Lagoon is basically come in here, hide your boat, and good luck. And then what happens is half of the boats sink, or even more, and then they're stuck there, and we are ended to clean up the bill.
This year, it's not going to be like that. You cannot enter unless you are insured, because it's left to St. Maarten to clean up the mess after.
Has that been passed on to the marine industry?
Well,
because tomorrow you're going to read in the paper, Prime Minister says no boats come in unless you're not insured.
They will get the memo after, because it's unfair, Glenn, that we are stuck with the bill. And then you have some, I can openly speak about it, because at the end of the day, you cannot leave the government responsible for that. So we're going to take charge, and we're going to say no one enters the lagoon if you don't have insurance. Because if you have insurance, then your insurance will pay if your boat sink, and then they will to take it out.
Sorry, Prime Minister, is that all year round or just for the hurricane season?
All year round.
All year round.
Reason why I'm asking is because the marina, from what I understood from the marinas, they asked all of the boats to leave. They actually strongly recommended them to leave, and the owners were like, no, it's fine. Well, they actually told their crew members to stay on board. Luckily, they didn't. But of course, they got damaged, and insurance pays them out in full, and then they leave the shipwreck in the Simpson Bay Lagoon for us to.
I think I can speak on behalf of Tuncha Buncampo. This time around, it's not going to happen.
Okay. All right. We're going to go to, I think, our last commercial break for the evening, and then we'll add into another 10 minutes, and we'll round it up. Interesting.
Remember your UTS communication checklist this hurricane season. Load enough prepaid credit to stay in touch with loved ones. Charge phone and other devices before a storm, and have a portable charger for outages. Take down your outdoor internet antenna to avoid damage or loss from high winds and debris. Store vital documents and communication equipment in a dry, secure place. Create a family emergency plan with meeting points and other provisions in case you get separated. Stay safe and stay in touch this hurricane season. For more preparedness tips, visit UTS EC on Facebook.
This hurricane season, Laser 101 is your Stormwatch team. Stormwatch team, bringing you the most accurate, up-to-the-minute weather information. We're Laser 101.
Sorry. Yes, and we are back, and we are going for the last roundup, and we are going to summarize what we think and what government recommends, and what the disaster coordinator recommends to have St. Maarten ready. But before we get to that, let's talk about another burning issue, the dump. Prime Minister, we see that hotels, or Clive, we see the Great Bay Hotel still being demolished. Good news is a brand new hotel is going to be built back, which is pretty good. We're going to get a new hotel, I think, in the Mullet Bay area, which is also good. But things still have to be demolished. Hopefully in October, we'll be starting our new hospital. Eventually, over 2 years, that's going to be demolished. How are we going to manage the dump? And maybe that's a Vromy question, but you're the one in front of me, so...
I think that's more a Vromy question. What I do know is that the last discussion we had with the World Bank, with one of the representatives at World Bank, they were looking into the possibility of removing the new dump, which is behind the Little Lead field, to start shipping that out. How further they got with that, I don't know, because I was not in the conversation after that. That's more something that has to be discussed with Vromy. But basically, I think we'll have to go over to having it shipped out and removed.
Because if we go over to the campaign, Prime Minister, you were just talking about with Toncha going around and clearing up all the galvanized and clearing up the containers, whatever, that's another, I mean, we have not a choice but to take it to the dump.
Yeah. Well, you know, I also heard, but we have to confirm such, is that one of the hotels that are demolishing, that they're actually shipping it out, shipping their debris out of the island. And it's very much commendable, because we have no place to put the debris at this moment, because we all have our own challenges that we're trying to make sure some of those debris get off the island.
Because right now the island needs at least a massive cleanup again to get it ready for the hurricane season.
Yes.
Coming back to disaster plans of vital companies, GEBE, Airport, Harbor, Telem, UTS, those. Where does your department, EOC, have some type of insights and really do tabletop exercises with these companies so that you know that you can believe what you're going to do is going to be done?
We have done tabletops with the airport. Our tabletops is based on those that have their disaster management plan prepared, and the airport is one of those that always have theirs prepared. I know the harbor had an old one, and they're busy renewing it at the moment. So as soon as that's finished and they give it in to us to go over and see that it's doable, then we'll go into having a tabletop with them also with the whole government organization, because it basically comes down still that Prime Minister is always responsible if something should happen. So all the different ESF coordinators have to take part in a tabletop.
I know in the conference, Prime Minister, you said there will be a follow-up.
Yes.
Will there also be a massive exercise with all the stakeholders to see, are we ready?
The idea, Glenn, is to make sure that we have more tabletops, because it's ideal to have plans on paper, but if you don't test them, how will you know that they will work? So the idea is not going to be a massive exercise in one session, but definitely starting June until July and perhaps even into August to start testing each ESF's disaster management plan. So the idea is to test what we have prepared, because you can't wait to test when a storm is there.
Now, how do you test theory to practice? In other words, company comes in, such and such and such. Yeah, we have that. Don't pack. That's taken care of.
Create different scenarios and
audit it.
Well, not audited, but in an exercise. I believe that we spoke about if we use, for example, which department? ESF group. ESF 7. Or fire department. You do a specific exercise and see, and then you evaluate it. Did you follow the plan? Was this and this executed in the right way? What areas can you improve it, or did you miss something?
Yeah.
So we are aiming for them to have a good operational plan, but now we have to test the operational plans.
And
sorry.
And basically, when we do live drills or evaluations, we always prefer to bring in someone from abroad to do the evaluation, because we don't want to create our own place, as
exactly.
they say. So we rather bring in someone that understands the procedures, the protocols, and they do the evaluation and give back feedback, because we don't want somebody say, oh, you are giving this one a better grade than you're giving us. And so we try to get someone from outside to come in.
I forgot, some people that still don't have roofs, seemingly they fall out of the criteria. Criteria is you don't have no job, or you're not a senior citizen. So they're just out of that criteria because they do have a job, but they're just not making enough. They can't get a loan from the bank because they're on an age. What happens to those people? So there's a solution for people to get roofs, but they fall out of that category.
I believe that this is an area that we've heard many persons speak about that area, and it's something that the VSI department is looking into to see how they can assist those individuals. But as soon as we know how, because we have to make an assessment how many persons we have in this specific situation, and also considering our budget constraints. That's why it's vital and important for us to get funding through the trust fund, but notwithstanding the fact that there were NGOs also assisting those individuals in the community as well with no criteria, that didn't meet certain criteria. So assistance was there. Remember, 7 million euros were given to NGOs to assist in roof repair, and we have called in the NGOs and asked them to give some information and feedback as to what all have you done thus far, and from the feedback that I got, they were in the communities assessing, they were in the communities assisting in rebuilding, and yes, so persons have been getting help. So now we have to look and identify now which other group has fell through the cracks.
That's exactly what I think is happening. Some of them are falling through the cracks, and I think maybe there should be a centralized area, because they're WhatsApping me as we are talking here, that they registered, people came to look, and it died a natural death.
I believe I've heard of those. We have those discussions. That's between VSA and Vromi, and we're going to look back over. We're going to look at those lists again to make sure that each person is contacted. But I know that there is a master list of all the homes that they have visited, and they will be coming back again, revisiting those persons on the list, because the projects are starting and will start. But at the time you couldn't start if you didn't have the funding. So they had to do an assessment so that they can know, well, what do we have out there? Who all we have to contact? What all do we have to do? So that individual or those individuals are known. They have made contact. They're on a list, and those lists are going to be worked on.
Okay. A listener. Problem with boats allowed in the lagoon is even if they show that they are insured, that doesn't stop them from getting paid out and never coming back to clean up the wreck.
That's what we just discussed.
SLAC will have to find a way to become the loss payee and not the owner of the boat.
Totally agree with that individual, and off air we had that discussion as well, and we identified that is also a problem, but we are going to look into it, because again, the responsibility cannot be on government, because it costs a lot of money to get these boats out of the lagoons.
So this is something that SLAC should look into?
Yes.
Okay. Jennifer, you have any more questions?
Well, this is more not necessarily into the preparedness of hurricane, but more into, can we paint a picture for the public since Hurricane Irma? We know there was food distribution going on. Is that still going on at this point, or has it completely stopped? We know we have some assistance from the Dutch police right now. You kind of see them on the road. Could you maybe paint a picture of what kind of assistance that does not fall under the trust fund, that the money that we're about to receive, that is still going on right now? If any, maybe there isn't, but
or does that fall under the trust fund? Or the police that we are having, they are helping us they're doing a great job. Is that part of the trust fund?
I believe not, because they're here already.
They were getting, the police was getting, or are getting direct assistance from the Netherlands, and that's not under the 400. Yeah, that's not going on. That's not under the 470 million. They're going to get direct financing from the Netherlands. Okay. Are there other groups here, assistance since Maarten, that are not under the trust fund? Yes. If I can think of the Samaritan person, I must commend them, because they've assisted. And just to name a few, there are others, but that's one just came to mind. They have assisted many churches in rebuilding, and that wasn't part of our the trust fund. You have other organizations that are here, but the Samaritan person is the one that pops out, because
their branding was also very much on point.
Very much so. And I honestly, I never heard of them before until Hurricane Irma, and they did a tremendous job in assisting the churches with their roofs, with whatever damages that they had. I know I can state that because they also helped the church that I'm a member of.
Okay. So there still is help ongoing, assistance.
Yes, there are, and Red Cross also have a program that I believe that they're still going out and assisting on some levels. I'm not sure if they're going to do their voucher program again, but we're going to call all the NGOs back in again so that we can have a assessment again. Okay, hurricane season has started. Where are we? Mm-hmm. What are we? What do we need to work on still? Mm-hmm. So we're going to put everybody together again and say, okay, we have to know our status. So we did one before, but now June is here. June is coming. We need to know our status and what else do we need to accomplish before with a timeline.
Because they might be able to be in contact with those that fell through the cracks, for instance.
Correct.
Okay, Prime Minister, Mr. Richardson, we have 6 minutes to wrap up this program. In the next 3 hours, the hurricane season is going to start. Let's reach a consensus on things we spoke about tonight. Do we agree that we're going to promote shelters? Government is going to continue to assess and work on it, but the main message is everyone look for alternatives if your house has been compromised.
Yes.
Do we agree with that?
We agree.
Okay, so we're going to be sending out PSAs. DCOM is going to work in at all radio stations, newspapers. People, do not count really on the government for shelters, because this is a challenge. Look for alternatives. Okay. Self-supporting. We just had a conversation with DCOM. Will we say a week? Do we say 2 weeks? I would say 2 weeks. Self-supporting for 2 weeks. have enough food, water, medication. Battery radios.
Yes.
What we do know, and speaking of experience, there's not one telecom company can guarantee, because we forget we also have fiber optic cables coming in to the country that can burst. They're in the ocean, rough seas. There's no telecom company can guarantee with 100% that we will not lose telecom. We will. So battery operated radios and no candles in your house for alternatives on that. Mr. Richardson, you agree on that?
I completely agree on that, Glenn. I even noticed that after the Irma, my parents had a light that you charge by day, and it burned all night. So I think it would be better to go in that direction, or solar charge lights instead of candles. Safer.
We also agreed, again, coming on the self-supporting medication.
Yes, it's important.
Jennifer's favorite topic, your pets. We're going to have programs about what do you do with your pets. We had cases where people had their dogs tied to a tree, and the tree actually got uprooted and took the dog along with it.
Wow. We also talk about pets also, and I totally agree how we handle our pets. We need a plan for that as well. But in addition, our children. You know, Glenn, we often forget the children, and there are certain things that can happen or we can do to make sure that the child is not traumatized after or during a storm. There's certain steps that can be taken. You have to keep the child occupied, get them, you make sure that certain things are charged, what certain things that are, keep the child occupied so that the child does not be traumatized after. We often forget about preparing our children for when a storm is there, because we go into the adult mode of survival, and we need to have an evacuation plan for those children as well. We need to prepare. So for example, if your child have to leave the country, you have to make sure that they have their IDs, their passports. Where are you going to send them to? Make sure that the child you make arrangements from beforehand. Get in contact with family members abroad just in case, because we often forget the children as well.
Yeah. We will have follow-up programs. I think inviting you back again as soon as you can get some of this information we needed. But we will have programs talk about insurance. That's another hot topic about insurance. Right now, the premiums have doubled, tripled. A lot of people are entering the new season with their houses no longer insured. So this we're going to talk about. We'll have other programs. But as we reach the end of this program, we have 2 minutes left. I'll give each of you the opportunity for your closing remarks. Mr. Richardson?
My thing pertaining to disaster management is better to be prepared from beginning. Invest in your own safety, because it will save you an extra $1 in the long run. And don't wait till the last minute to do things, because I noticed last year, the Sunday, the Monday, the Tuesday, the Koimon, the Ace, everybody was filled. And it's best to prepare from the beginning so that when the time comes, you have minor things to do.
Okay. Prime Minister.
I want to first thank you for giving us the opportunity to come and on this program. I want to urge the public indeed to start preparing from now. Do not wait for last minute. Have your plans ready. Stay tuned to viable official resources, because we know how things can go. Social media can play a role, and things can go haywire. So stick to the facts. Being prepared is everybody's responsibility. I would like to take this opportunity to emphasize that it's each individual's responsibility. Government have a responsibility, but so do individuals. Take care of your household items, your family, your pets, your children. Have an evacuation plan. Plan, because proper planning is in recovering faster.
Okay. Well, Mr. Richardson, Prime Minister, thank you so much for being our guest this evening. And there will be follow-up programs. And again, community of St. Maarten, you can count on the usual assistance of Laser 101 throughout the season. Hopefully we don't have to be doing it much, but more in awareness and preparedness. And we'd like to bring the program to an end with the closing remarks of Mr. Joseph Isaac. There was a 3 or 5 minute segment that we cut short just now, where he will just give a little bit more update of what we can expect. Have a beautiful evening, and see you soon. Yeah, and we are back with Mr. Isaac, the head of the meteorology department here in St. Martin. And in fact, Mr. Isaac, I saw that we have a storm forecast. Well, forecast. One of the names is Isaac. So I hope you don't have to be reporting about yourself.
Generally, that one would be quiet. If that's the case, I would go that way.
Yes. Mr. Isaac, the hurricane belt. Curacao, Aruba, Bonaire always say, hey, come to Curacao, we're out of the hurricane belt. We're safe, we're outside of it. However, we have been seeing, certain things with environment changing. Is that correct? Or has the hurricane belt shifted a little bit?
To a great extent, it's not shifted. But what you can find happening, and I will give you the example of what happened with Tropical Storm Erica. If you remember the number of deaths Tropical Storm Erica caused in Dominica.
Yep.
And the amount of rainfall they got. But the center of circulation for Tropical Storm Erica passed a lot closer to St. Martin than Dominica. In that Dominica wasn't even under watch or warning, but St. Martin was under watch and warning. So what you can find happening is that because the center of circulation is really a point, and what happens out of the system can also be significant. So, for example, with Erica, what happened is that the center of circulation was moving, but because it wasn't a very strong system, a lot of the convection wasn't moving as quick with it, and it just sat over Dominica and it poured. So even if, for example, you have Barbados, which is down south, Curacao, those islands, Trinidad, and so on, while they may not be in what we call the hurricane belt, you can get bands from a hurricane that may not be moving quickly, and that could easily sit over those islands, and they could get a lot of convective activity.
So basically the entire Caribbean should be ready for anything that is tropically a tropical system.
Yeah, that's correct. But in terms of they down south, the probabilities of they being affected would be less than in our area.
Now, last year's, again, monster storm Irma, we won't forget it for quite some time, came and really shook this island massively. What does it mean for us to get a Category 1, Category 2, right after this on an island that has not rebuilt?
Well, it would be a challenge, and I think that is something that the authorities are very much concerned of. Even in our situation in the Met Office, we have our own challenges, which is as a result of Irma, that we've been not really where we would like to be presently. Not that we cannot provide the information. We will provide the information during the season. But a lot of persons are not back up. You still have houses with tarpaulins and so on. So actually, if you get a Category 1 hurricane, for some persons it could be like a Category 3 because they're already compromised. But in terms of, can we say, are we ready or not? It's just a matter of the situation as it is, that we have to deal with it, and whether we're ready or not, there's nothing we cannot put out a poster and say not ready and expect the storm to go elsewhere. You remember with the case of Irma last year, 10 days after, we were dealing with the possibility of Maria affecting us. Correct. And while we did not get any significant impacts from Maria compared to what we got from Irma, we couldn't say that we just had something 10 days before. So as a result, we cannot take another system. That's where we live. We just have to do our best, and we just have to be cognizant of the fact that we have to prepare ourselves as much as we can.
So in other words, having a weaker system, say a tropical storm or a Category 1 or Category 2, moving very near to us at a very slow speed could be nearly just as bad as having a Category 4 or 5 passing near to us at a very high speed.
Yeah, that's correct, because, for example, if you have a system that may not be very strong and it's moving slow, then you get more rainfall, because also we're seeing that in the systems now you get a lot of rainfall. And let's just do a small comparison with what happened last year. Irma was a stronger Category 5 than Maria, but Maria would have caused more damage because Maria was moving a lot slower.
Correct.
And Maria had a lot more water in it. So while Irma came over St. Martin and moved, but it didn't give us as much rainfall as Maria would have dumped on Dominica. Topography, yes, would also come into play. But in terms of just the estimated water from those two systems, while Irma was a stronger system, Maria had more water in it, and Maria was moving slower. So it would be your same case scenario if you go years back with Louis. Louis would have caused a big impact on St. Martin because of how slow it was moving. So you could have a storm that's very strong, but if it's moving fast, it's better for you than if it's moving slow.
So to wrap up the weather aspect, the indications we have right now are tools that you guys use that basically indicates that the season is going to be above average.
Slightly
above average. Technically speaking, the same forecast that we started out with last year. So,
but I think there's more, to be honest. I think there's more certainty in the forecast this year than last year. But again,
you're being cautious.
Yeah, we have to be cautious. And like we say, whether we get 10 storms or we get 5,
it depends on where they go.
It depends on where they go, and the science is not that good to say where it's going.
Correct.
So it's just a matter of the amount of energy, the upper level winds, what is happening with the oscillations and so on, whether we're dealing with El Nino or La Nina. Based on that, the scientists can say, okay, storms are going to form, they're going to form rapid, X, Y, and Z, but the science cannot predict that early where they're going to go. So we're going to have updates. There are going to be updates coming up. There would be updates early June. There will be another update again around August from the main institutions that we look at, Colorado State, NOAA, etc. And we'll see how it goes from there. But like everything else, we have to be in preparation mode.
I'm going to ask you the question I'm going to ask the other panelists in just a while also. St. Martin, are we ready? What do you think?
St. Martin, are we ready? It's an individual question, an institutional question. You may find one institution may be pretty good because they didn't get much of an impact last year. I think it would be challenging if we got affected by any severe storm this year. And I think all we really have to do is really try our best to get ready.
Yeah. Your advice to our listeners?
The advice to our listeners is always know where to get information, where to get credible information. There's going to be a lot of excitement this year because of what happened last year. There are going to be a lot of Facebook posts. There are persons who are not going to read things properly, and they're going to interpret it and put their own interpretations, which would be incorrect. And as a result of that, people needs to really know what sources to take information from. For example, I remember sometime last year, Antigua Met Service put out something for Antigua, and because of WhatsApp and so on, it came across that it was coming from the Met Service of St. Martin, and the impacts on it would the waves would have had on Antigua would be different from what we were saying in St. Martin. But then because you have no boundaries and control of information and so on, someone from Antigua sends it to someone from St. Martin and they start sending it around without even realizing the impacts they're talking about would be for Antigua and not St. Martin. So we have to be very careful with information. Everyone also has a responsibility before you get information, instead of just passing it out and adding your own to it, because you could be sending people to do things that they're not supposed to do.
Yeah,
and you could be harming persons in the process. Yeah. So we as residents, we have a responsibility to be responsible for each other. So as a result of that, I would just encourage persons to know you have a Met service, you have other sources of information that are very credible that you can go for information. When you get information maybe coming from somewhere and you're not sure, try to contact the Met office or some other person who is credible, and then you can take it from there.
Sensation, fake news, social media makes your job much more difficult.
Yeah, it is. It is very challenging, and a lot of times we try to be ahead, but sometimes you have persons who are very good in graphics and they can put things a certain way to make it catchy, and we have to be very careful with that. But we have the Met Service webpage. We are on Facebook. and everything else. So if persons want information, they can get it. We work very closely with all the radio stations, and we don't hold back information. As soon as we have information, we put all the credible information out there. Persons must also remember that when dealing with weather is not something, it's not a perfect science. And when you see a forecast on a 5 days out that say you're going to get a direct hit, it may not happen. However, it doesn't mean that the next system, you can say it didn't happen the last time, so it will not happen. We just have to always be prepared and put ourselves in a state of readiness.
Mr. Isaac, thank you very much. In the next few hours, the hurricane season, June 1st, 2018 shall start. You have your special parking place right outside of our studios with your name in it now. So, as you said, we hope we wouldn't have to make too much use of your services for this hurricane season. But if we do, thank you for your usual cooperation and from here at Laser 101.
Yes, Glenn, thanks very much to you and your team on behalf of the Met Services, and we have a very solid team at the Met Service that gives you all. I'm not the only one doing it. I have a very strong support team, and we look forward to continue working with you and the media, and we appreciate much your recognitions.
Right after this break, we'll continue with our other panelists here in the studio tonight with some very important information, preparedness, and awareness for the upcoming hurricane season.
This is PJD 5, Placer 101 St. Martin, transmitting on 101.1 megahertz from Phillipsburg, St. Martin.
Laser 101.
Remember your UTS communication checklist this hurricane season. Load enough prepaid credit to stay in touch with loved ones. Charge phone and other devices before a storm and have a portable charger for outages. Take down your outdoor internet antenna to avoid damage or loss from high winds and debris. Store vital documents and communication equipment in a dry, secure place. Create a family emergency plan with meeting points and other provisions in case you get separated. Stay safe and stay in touch this hurricane season. For more preparedness tips, visit UTS EC on Facebook.
I love you guys.
Come on! Broadcasting live from the epicenter of the Caribbean universe. This is St. Martin's #1 choice for hit music. Laser 101.